everyone to the Candice and Elisa show for a new episode. This time round, sadly, as probably a lot of you have seen on the news, the notorious RBG has passed away. And this is not only a horrible, devastating loss for the world because all of the amazing work that she did, but also this comes at a really pivotal political time as well, which we will be delving into later. But to begin with, Candice, I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about just this legend and force of nature that was still doing planks before before passing away.
I mean, what a titan. What an incredible just individual. And I think for me, where my respect for her came in is, besides all the incredible work she has done for women across the world, really, I think it's also, the small stories about her that I find fascinating. The fact that when her husband was sick, she would go and take notes for him in class, that she managed to have a child within this, work and in this kind of life, because I think
Harvard nonetheless.
Right. And for me, I mean, Elisa, you and I are both in this peacemaking field. We're in this industry, and we know what kind of sacrifice that takes on your emotional self, on your relationships, on every arena of your life, really. And for her to have been able to do it with such grace and never really make us feel as though like I'm sacrificing for you, but instead just doing it and, allowing us to just observe her doing what she really just wanted to do. And how are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I think grace is something really pivotal to how she behaved, because I think that so many times we expect these peacemakers to be so loud and have these voices and I mean, she certainly had the reach, but the way that she implemented it was so almost moving quietly, she was always in a bit of a more behind the scenes kind of arena. I think that's where her comfort zone lay. And I just think that the impact, I mean, every woman that lives in any kind of Western society at the moment has felt the ripple effect of what she did. And whether we know it or not, we are reaping the benefits of what she's done. And I think one of the things that's terrifying for me is to see how many of the steps forward that she took have already been taken back by the current US president, but also the direction that we might go with him announcing a new nominee that might be really, really tilting things in a direction that will be so negative for women.
And the fact for me that he's trying to elect another woman in the space, right?
Yes, what a coincidence. He's so forward thinking. Oh my God, he wants a woman. Come on.
For me, I think that is a little bit of a worrying moment, because I mean, he's making it seem as though all women are for women, and that is not really the reality, right? As a woman, it may be sad to say so, but it's just the truth of the matter. And so to have such a legend and someone who's just got such a strong legacy, and then go to another woman who may sit back, I mean, I saw some of the front runners, and one of them really kind of scared me because she is very conservative, whereas RGB, for me at least, managed to kind of weigh both sides. Weigh both sides of
that's how much it affected me when I saw her too.
I can tell. You had an outward reaction to my inward life. But it really is the fact that RBG managed to really, for me, be very conscious of both sides and make very fair, justified decisions. Whereas one of the front runners is very, conception starts in the womb, and she really is anti, women having rights over their own body. And for me, that is always the, whether you believe it or you don't do it. You don't believe in abortion, then don't have an abortion. It's that simple. However, to try and control women's bodies, for me, it makes my skin stand. And so for me, I'm completely worried. I'm worried about how exactly he's going to choose, but also I'm worried at the pace he's moving at.
Yeah, the fact that he wants to announce someone by the end of the week. I mean, this man is in a rush. He's clearly, needing to make this decision. I mean, because he knows that he's got a ticking clock for the next election, right? He wants to make sure that he's got enough control, that he's really put his tentacles in as far as he can. And I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. The fact that so many states in the US and so many freedoms that women had fought for were stripped and were taken back. I mean, funding for Planned Parenthood that was completely destroyed. And I think the key here, you know, I grew up in a super Catholic country. I always went to Catholic school, and I know culturally for many people, you know, this is a very important line. But as you said, you know, unless we are raising the bar of support for women who might be on their own who get pregnant, and we're giving them assistance so that these children can have access to education, to hygiene, to proper places to live, why are we funneling women into these horrific directions, right? Stripping them from the possibility of having planning, you know, using all kinds of, you know, mechanisms to control whether they get pregnant or not. We're stripping them from that, and then we're stripping them from the resources. So it's like, you know, how how do we do this?
It's difficult. It's really difficult to know that not only is the world mourning this titan, however, we have to think now of what is next. And I know that, you know, we tend to focus on American politics a lot, and
Yes.
neither one of us are American. I'm South African, you know, you Mexican. And I think it's very important for people to understand that, you know, in the world today, no country is operating in isolation.
Yeah.
And therefore, whatever happens in one ends up rippling out into the rest of the world. And the reason America tends to be in the spotlight so much is because of what is going on and how that is going to ripple out and affect, as you said, many westernized countries. And for me right now, what I wonder and what I'm looking at is, you know, you and I, as I mentioned, are in this peace building space. So how do we continue to move this fight forward? Because it's not enough to stop where we are. How do you see us continuing this fight, continuing to really move and progress forward?
It's a tough one, because the reality is that I think the most important thing is that we keep bringing these issues forward like we are, but keep, you know, like we've addressed since our very first episode with Black Lives Matter, is you have to start working from your circle, right? With with contact with the people, having those challenging, you know, conversations that you don't really want to have sometimes, when somebody puts a comment on Facebook and you're like, oh, I'm just going to block this person and pretend they don't exist. No, that's your circle. Engage. You know, it's part of our role in society, if we want to move forward in a positive way, to have positive impact that actually ripples across. If we just sit down and twiddle our thumbs, I mean, I'm sorry, but when I look at, it's not just the US, like you said, you know, if I look at Brazil, if I look at Mexico, if I look at the UK, the way that we're moving at the moment is a little bit terrifying. And I think that whenever we take a step back to look at the umbrella vision of the world, I feel heavy-hearted. I feel like, okay, it's heavy, right? I mean, I don't know how you feel.
Heavy is an understatement. I think when you are constantly exposed to what is going on within your own country, South Africa's got the highest statistics in probably everything that you don't want to have the highest statistics in: gender-based violence, sexual assault, rape, you know. And for me right now, as a South African woman, as a woman in general, as a global citizen, it is so incredibly important for us to realize that change is not going to come from out there. And for the longest time, we thought our politicians would bring us change, and we've seen repetitively that politics is not the answer to our problems. And so, as you said, you know, it is about influencing the circle you do have. It's about making the impact that you can have in your community. You and I, we have media base, so our main work tends to be in the media community. And so if you can have conversations that are impactful, because for me, the reason I'm in this work is because I've overheard conversations. It's because I was in those talks. It's because I was in these spaces that allowed me to look and think differently. And I think for as long as we can continue to have respectful, open dialogues, that does change society.
Yeah.
And for as long as we engage, we're willing to engage and say, it's not my opinion and I'm right. I'm willing to amend my opinion if you've got a better solution, if you've got a better way of moving forward. And I think for me, as you said, you know, this is such a time of heavy-heartedness. I think obviously the global pandemic is kind of the overarching issue that we're facing right now. But the ripple effects of how it has really spotlighted the cracks in almost every society in the world is, I think, the biggest conversation point we should be having right now.
And I think there's also a collective responsibility to not stand for policy that we disagree with, because the reality is that we need politicians, we need lawyers, we need Supreme Court justices to stand for what we need to move forward in a positive manner, right? If we just sit down and not speak about these things and just kind of go with the flow wherever the direction these people take us, we are going to end up in even a worse place than the one that we find ourselves in right now. So I think that by speaking out, by saying I disagree, by writing to people and actually saying, this is not okay, but it means that we do have to take a much more active role, because we've unfortunately gotten to the point where we cannot trust our politicians. We cannot trust our leaders. And these are the people that are supposed to look out for us, but they're living in such different circles. They're almost like in a bubble that's so disconnected from the people that they actually represent that it becomes our role to actually try and enter that, to go, that is the wrong direction. Do not take me there. I refuse. you know?
Absolutely. And I completely agree with you. It is about not really stepping back and saying, I have a dual relationship with social media in terms of activism.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be a very profound tool for activism. I think it is a beautiful tool to highlight what's going on in the world. I am afraid of being a Twitter activist, whereby I'm tweeting all these things, but I'm not doing the things that are required in order to change them. Like you're saying, writing those letters, gathering that community, making sure that people within your own life, within your own environment, aren't, subjected to certain treatment and ways of life, right? Because the problem is, for me, at least in my work, what I find is the longer someone is exposed to a certain environment, the quicker it becomes normal. And when we start to normalize bad behavior, bad governance, bad policing, then it becomes a crisis of not only a community, but of a country. And then from the country becomes a global crisis, which is what I think is happening right now. I look at every country in the world, Jacinda Ardern excluded. I'm kidding. We bow. but I look at every, country in the world, and I'm looking at how the systems that have been in place for the past, hundreds and hundreds of years are starting to collapse. And we have to be a part of rebuilding what the new reality is going to look like for people. And that's not going to happen when you're like just sitting back and you're like, oh, I don't want to say anything. But yeah, that's my point of view. And I mean, this is a conversation like every other. We could just go on and on.
Forever and ever and ever. I mean, one final note on that as well is, I think so much of the focus tends to be on once things have already gone wrong. And this applies to, there's, in South Africa, for example, there needs to be more victim support. We need to have more, but what about more prevention? What about more restorative justice? What about really taking the model? The one thing about South Africa the whole world can learn from is, how do you bring a country divided, where you have people that lost people because of the other person, like your own personal story, and how are you able to move forward from that and heal and actually create something out of that? And at the moment, I hear so much, oh, we need, more hospitals, more this, more that. Sure, more psychologists. But it's like, why have more victim focus or more prisons or all this stuff if you're not fixing your water system? It doesn't matter how many hospitals you build. If your tap is broken and there's poisoned water, you're never going to be able to fix the problem. And I think so much boils down to national curriculums, education, teaching people from a young age that they can have a tool set and coping mechanisms for when things are going wrong, identifying when things are going wrong, teaching us how to be a more amicable, inclusive society, even when points of view differ. Difference should not just be feared and therefore excluded. It should be embraced, and therefore we can collaborate and learn from it. And as you said, this is something we could just keep talking about forever, so I won't carry on. From my 2 cents.
No. I think that was such an important point to close on. And I think you're right. We need to start focusing on prevention. As we know, prevention is always better than cure. When we can prevent these systems from collapsing, it will, in the long run, save us more. In the short term, of course, it's going to be more expensive. Of course, it's going to require a bigger structural change, system change. However, the resources you're investing now will far outweigh what you are losing in the future. Because in the future, when you have more healed, when you have more whole citizens in your country, and you're governing people who are coming from a place of healing and willing to embrace and willing to be open to different opinions, then we can keep moving forward. Because what we don't want is, you know, a human population where everyone thinks the same, God forbid, you know, but we do need to be much more respectful, inclusive, and understanding of one another's viewpoints. And so, guys, you know, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. As usual, if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye.
Take care.